Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. It is officially here. We have officially ended the regular season, officially over, and we're gonna talk about that last week. I am Aaron, and as per usual, I'm joined by Mr. John Harris. How was your weekend, John?
It's bittersweet because it's the end of college football with the national championship last night. The NFL regular season finishes up, and so you kind of feel like, we're coming to the close. It's exciting for, anybody whose team is in the playoffs, but at the same time, it always sucks when you get less football.
Yeah, but at least we get quality football,
It's
playoff
true.
football from here on out. It was a fun national title game. I watched the second half. Luckily, I missed the first half because apparently it was looking like it was gonna be, and we won't dwell on long on this. It was gonna be. I was scared it was gonna be like the LSU Alabama one, where it's like they went in like 9-6, like
Yeah.
when like 10 years ago. That I was like, man, hopefully it doesn't end up being like that. Luckily, the scoring picked up, got a little exciting. Obviously, congratulations Georgia, but yeah, like John mentioned, we're here to talk about this last week of the regular season. This might be a rather quick episode. A few games are relevant, kind of. We'll go over all of them, but some of them just not much to say, especially these Saturday games, and that's obviously where we will start. So now we dive into first one we're gonna go to is the Chiefs Broncos. Chiefs beat the Broncos 28-24. Looks like the Broncos were actually going to win this game. Not that it would have mattered for the Chiefs, but then uh, Melvin Gordon fumbles and the Chiefs scoop and score, and it was just game over from there on out. So, any real thoughts or any additions? Also, uh, I believe Big Fangio has been fired, correct?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I know. Yeah, so Big Fangio also fired shortly after this game. I think that was that next Monday. So Denver will be looking for another head coach and probably a new quarterback since that has been an issue pretty much since Payton's left. But any, I guess, thoughts in regards to this game and I guess the whole Broncos situation?
For the game, obviously it was a Saturday game, so the Chiefs didn't know the fate of the Titans, so they're gonna play to win regardless. It didn't really matter much in the end. I don't know if it had any effect on seeding or, if they had lost and like maybe Cincinnati had won, maybe they jumped them, but it didn't really matter because Cincinnati even then had already announced that they were gonna rest Joe Burrow and Mixon and all those guys. So in the grand scheme, this game was pretty meaningless outside it was Vic Fangio's last game. And I don't really think that this game really had any impact on his firing. Um, he's he's one of those coaches that I think is really well respected. And I think I even texted you this, or maybe it was someone else. I think it was my buddy who's a Broncos fan that I feel like he can sort of be like, Dan Quinn is this year to where maybe not the same success, but if he goes somewhere, I think he can be a great defensive coordinator. I don't feel that necessarily he's right now, at least, going to be a great head coach. But we've seen over the years during his time in Denver, even I got to see it firsthand with the Cowboys this year that like he can come up with some great defensive schemes. And so maybe he's just one of those guys that needs to go elsewhere and just become a DC, rebuild his stock. Maybe he can become a head coach in the future, although based on his age, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just going to be a DC for the rest of his career. I'm not sure, but regardless, good win for the Chiefs. Um, Not much else to say on this one. Will be interesting to see who Denver goes after as their coach because when they won the Super Bowl, they had Gary Kubiak. He was an offensive minded coach. Then they went and they got Fangio here, defensive minded guy. Have a great defense,
They'd have Greg
but
Joseph in between.
yeah, they did have Greg Joseph. I forgot about that in the middle there. Or sorry, Vance
Vance
Joseph.
Joseph, Mark Joseph.
Which I'm a big fan of Vance Joseph, but the two defensive coordinator or defensive minded coaches over their last two tenures have not really worked out for them. So maybe they steer towards an offensive minded guy. I'm not sure, but that's off season talk.
Yeah, just on Fangio, I still think he's a good. He just got put it. Denver's. I don't want to say Denver's obviously not a terrible like team organization. They just. I think it's a little unfair to Fangio. He just never had a quarterback really. It's like, oh, we drafted Drew Lock, and I know I was high on Drew Lock, but we're starting to see that quarterback class outside of Kyler Murray, not looking too great. And then yeah, they grabbed Teddy Bridgewater, but I think we all know Teddy Bridgewater is Teddy Bridgewater. Like he's not. He's not gonna lose you games. He's not gonna win you games. So I just think he got caught in a bad situation in terms of quarterback. Built a solid team all the way around. Is just missing that one key piece, really. And it was unfortunate because they seemed like they really were pursuing Aaron Rodgers, like they were trying, and it just didn't work out for them. So I hope Fangs gets another chance. Yeah, he might. I think you're right. He will have to probably go, unfortunately, back to a DC, but hopefully very soon he gets another opportunity, and obviously get. I think he'll be probably smarter about where he even picks next time too. Probably going to go, with a place that has a more established quarterback. So that's something he doesn't have to worry about. But yeah, in regards to Kansas City, I mean, this game didn't really matter. I believe. I think they would have been at worst. They would have been 2 seed. I think so. Yeah, I mean, I guess a good win for them. Get their team a little back on track, a little more confidence going into wild card weekend. But now we go to your game where your Cowboys beat the Eagles 51-26. Um, I didn't get to watch much of this game. I think I was on the road for this one too. Went back and watched the review. Did the Eagles have some second, third? I know Gardner played, but like on defense and other positions, I know Jason Kelsey played one snap. So like the Eagles play a lot of their backups. I'm guessing. Also,
Yeah, so which when we made our picks, I actually wasn't even aware of them potentially doing this. But
I
like
mean,
the
yeah,
next day,
same.
I found out. And also the Cowboys, I mean, they held true to their word. They said they're going to play starters, and they played them all the way through, even in the fourth quarter. Maybe it was late in the third when they pulled them. I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, they Eagles had benched a lot of players. There was very few, if any, important players that were out there, and I think it was because they knew that first off, they're fighting an uphill battle because if Dallas does play their starters, I mean, Dallas beat them earlier in the year. And also, they were guaranteed the wild card spot. They couldn't get anything better, and they weren't going to get the fifth seed. So it was basically, do we want 6 or 7? The only way that we get 6 is if we win here and maybe something falls our way with the San Francisco game. Um, it didn't matter in the end because San Francisco won, and we'll talk about that game later. So the Eagles, I think, did the right thing. They rested their guys. They're getting them ready. They have a tough rematch with Tampa Bay, who beat them earlier in the year, and it's in Tampa. So, yeah, the Eagles. I mean, this game, really not much to say about it for either team because the Cowboys, like I said, they played a lot of their key players for most of this game. So they came out, they did what they were supposed to do for the Eagles. They're resting guys. So this is expected. So for Philly, we didn't really learn anything. For Dallas, I mean, their offense looked good, but maybe this is just the thing where they're just trying to get their rhythm going. That's what they kept saying. And considering all the inconsistency over the last couple months, I'm glad that they looked good, and you just got to hope that for their sake they can keep it going in the playoffs.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, we'll talk more Wednesday about the matchups, or Thursday we never do the picks, since we only have six games to pick from, anyways. But yeah, so Philly will play Tampa, and Dallas plays San Francisco, like you mentioned. So we'll see. But yeah, like John mentioned, not much to talk about this game because Dallas played their starters. Philly really didn't. I mean, other than the fact that maybe good confidence going forward for Dallas's offense. Your offense is kind of, but we also saw this against the Washington football team. Granted, it was a mixture of both offense and defense. So hopefully it's something Dallas can keep building off of. But we'll have to see, for real this Sunday or Saturday whenever they play. But now we go another meaningless game. Browns beat the Bengals. Bengals had their backups in. Browns had Case Keenum. Hooray, Cleveland! You got to win. I literally have nothing to add to this game. Like honestly, didn't even watch it. Don't care. But I don't know if you have anything to add. Sorry, Ohio people. This game was literally meaningless.
Yeah, I didn't watch this one either. Didn't really pay attention. I was watching Red Zone for the most part because Cowboys had already played, and so they were putting an emphasis on the games that did matter. I mean, they showed a few little highlights of this one, but really, like you said, not a whole lot to say in this one. Um, good job, Cleveland. Cincy, once again, they're resting their guys going into the playoffs. Jamar Chase did play in the first quarter to break Chad Ochocinco's record for receiving yards by a Bengals wide receiver. So that was cool. Monstrous that he would do that in his rookie year. So that was great. But other than that, yeah, not much else to say.
Just because I've seen and I love the personality that Ocho Cinco is, I know that he's probably going out there like I love Jamar, but he's like, but he had an extra game
Yeah.
to do it. It's just I feel like it'd be something he would say if he hasn't already said it. So, anyways, yeah. Now we go. We can keep mowing through these meaningless games. My Packers lost to the Lions 37-30. Kind of went as we thought. Rodgers and the starters played first half, and then it was Jordan Love in the second half. Um, I don't have much to add. Good for Detroit. It's a great win for them, and just unfortunate that I guess it was fortunate that Jaguars also won, which we'll talk about that game later, because I don't know. Some people would have been upset. Oh, you could have had the 1 seed if the Jaguars did lose or whatever, but or had still won and Detroit had decided to lose. But yeah, I think it's important for the culture is important. And Dan Campbell's, especially the way they've ended end of the year, they've won a couple of games, and it's just good to get some of those wins while you can in the NFL. And I think I've mentioned it. Just like the first and second pick, there's been a lot of good first picks and a lot of bad first picks. Same with this number 2 overall pick. So, yeah, it's we make it a big deal, but it's not really a huge deal because really, once again, the draft, you really don't know what you're gonna get. You kind of know, but it could all fall apart, as anyone who's followed the draft or sports in general knows. So, yeah. Sorry, did I already throw it to you for Detroit this game, or do you have anything to add?
I mean, I don't have much else to add. Obviously, I agree that you said culture is important for Dan Gamble. I mean, they weren't locked into the number 1 pick anyway. And this isn't a draft where there's like a true cut number 1 guy. Like there's like 5 guys that I've seen that have the potential to even go number 1 to where, last year it was Trevor Lawrence. So there's nobody that you're like purposely losing for that you think you can't get if you're at 2. So there was no reason for them to lose this game. They went out, they won, good win for them. And we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about the Giants game, but just on the aspect of potentially throwing in your final week, that has not gone well the last couple of years. Philly with Doug Peterson last year, they did it and he got fired. I'm not going to say he got fired for that, but I'm sure that probably played a part. And then now, I don't want to say the Giants are tanking, but they certainly looked like they weren't trying that much. And Joe Judge just got fired today. So obviously Dan Campbell in his first year, I don't think a coach really can do much, if anything, to get fired in their first year outside of like a crazy controversy like Urban Meyer. So for Dan Campbell, I mean, it was good to see them go out and say, no, we're going to try and win this no matter who's on the field for the other team. And I really loved seeing the way they were celebrating after the game. So good for the Lions.
And I just want to throw out there, I mean, I forget, exactly who got hired when, but yeah, like you mentioned Jacksonville. I mean, imagine if Jacksonville would have gotten Dan Campbell, maybe they wouldn't be already back in the head coaching conversation again. And it's obvious. Like, I'm a Packers fan. I'm already kind of seeing. I'm not saying that Detroit's gonna be a success for sure, but Detroit's got a little bit more hope than they've had in a few years, especially since they have all these picks and they have some solid building pieces. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Lions. Obviously, the Packers. I'm glad that starters got some play because as opposed to having to rest 2 weeks. I think we saw that happen to Baltimore. Was it last year or the year before? I forget. But then they came out flat. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to get that over with, and no one got hurt.
I mean, think about when the last time the Cowboys and Packers played in the first round. Cowboys had a bye week after going 13-3. Y'all came to Dallas, and Cowboys, I think, started out going down like 17-0, and then y'all ended up winning. But like, I mean, the bye week coming out flat is a real thing.
Yeah, it is. Alrighty, so now this game purely meaningless, purely for pride. Minnesota Vikings beat the Chicago Bears 31-17. I mean, I'm glad they won because I had the Vikings. But I believe both head coaches fired here, both Matt Nagy and Mike Zimmer. So both interesting how both these teams go going forward. Because I think we could argue both these teams have talent. I think Mike Zimmer is a better head coach than Matt Nagy, and I'm not sure if he'll get a gig somewhere else, but he'll definitely be a good DC if he wants to do that. But in regards to Matt Nagy, I don't have any real comment. So, any comments or thoughts in regards to the Bears Vikings, the game, and I guess going forward?
I don't have much to say on the game. I didn't watch really any of this one. I saw some highlights like the Patrick Peterson pick six, the Justin Jefferson touchdown. So I mean, there's some good plays in this one, but it was a completely meaningless one. And the fact that both coaches got fired, now it's the narrative is now what's the future about, because nobody cares about this game. So for the Bears, I mean, it was inevitable. Everyone saw it coming. I'm more impressed that they went out and fired their GM as well. Not that I root for anyone to get fired, but it just felt like he's not done a great job of assembling this roster. You know, when a new GM often gets hired, they tend to bring in their quarterback, and the guy that he chose was Mitchell Trubisky. And when you're in a draft class with Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, pretty much anything of being those guys is going to fall short. And when those guys were available, you know, the GM is probably going to go down with the ship at some point. So the fact that he lasted this long, I was surprised, especially that he got a second chance to select another quarterback, being Fields. But I saw both of these firings coming, and so we'll see who the Bears hire. I think the rumors are Jim Harbaugh right now, but
I
we'll
certainly
see if
hope
he
so.
leaves.
Sorry,
We'll,
just go ahead. Because I'm just not a big believer in Jim Harbaugh. Like we saw he had so much talent in San Francisco, it all fell apart. And as someone who closely watches Michigan football, has had talent in Michigan football, and just finally this year beat Ohio State when Ohio State's kind of and then they get curb stomped by Georgia in the semifinal. So as a Packer fan, I am totally fine with Jim Harbaugh going there because that means the Bears are still a cakewalk.
So yeah, I mean, maybe that happens. I'm pretty sure he played for the Bears when he was a quarterback, and there's all these rumors swirling around him potentially leaving Michigan. So it seems like that could be a possibility. I don't know the other candidates. Same for the Vikings. No idea who the other candidates are. I think they requested like Brian Daboll so far. I don't know who else. So I think they'll probably want to get maybe an offensive minded coach because they just came off a defensive minded one, and teams tend to switch in that case. So we'll see. I mean, the Vikings, they definitely have talent to work with. The defensive side of the ball, they're going to have to start working on because a lot of the key players there are pretty old, like Harrison Smith. I'm blanking on the defensive tackle's name that they have.
They had Bernard Pierce.
Not him. Oh man,
They bring back Sheldon Richardson, right?
Yeah, they have him, but it wasn't him. I mean, I know they have Dalvin Tomlinson, but
You're not talking about Danielle Hunter.
no, not Danielle Hunter. Anyway, I can't remember who it was. Maybe he's not even on the team anymore. I'm really
You're not talking
blanking
about
on who this
Linval
guy.
Joseph.
Maybe I was thinking of Linval Joseph,
Okay.
but I don't. Anyway,
because he's no longer on the team. I think I'm not sure he's in the league anymore. Maybe he was on the Chargers, but I don't think
he's on
he's
the
been
Chargers.
playing. He may be injured. But
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Regardless, you know, some of their key playmakers on defense, Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith, some other guys, even Anthony Barr, you know, Eric Kendricks are starting to get towards that age to where maybe you got to start looking towards the future. So for the defense, they're going to need some work. But when you have some offensive building blocks like Justin Jefferson, even Adam Thielen for a few more years, Dalvin Cook for a few more years, when you got guys like that, you know, there's going to be hope regardless. So it'll be interesting to see who they hire. You know, but both teams, I think you gotta look towards who can bring you maybe not necessarily like this upcoming season into relevance, but post Aaron Rodgers. I think you need to start looking at what the Bills did, and that is building your team for when that great quarterback who has run the division for a long time is gone. Can you elevate yourself to be the replacement? We'll see if they can, but it all starts with this coaching hire.
yeah, so we'll see. And for Mike Zimmer, like I said, I think he's a solid coach, so we'll see what happens with him.
I've already seen rumors that he would return to Dallas. He formerly coached the Dallas Cowboys, not as the head coach, but he would return there if Dan Quinn was to leave and take a head coaching job.
That wouldn't be a bad replacement. So, anyways, now we go to your division. Washington football team beats the Giants 22-7. Anyways, as John mentioned, Giants let go Joe Judge. Dave Gettleman retired. Air quotes around retired. Just saying, like air quotes. We were talking a lot in our group chat with friends about this one, or really about the Giants. It's like I said, it's like deja vu every year. It's just, we need to draft a line. So, it's funny because I thought of all people, Dave Gettleman he believes in big old linemen and solid fronts, and besides Andrew Thomas, which was kind of obvious, it was like they got their pick of the litter of tackles last draft. Been missing on offensive linemen thus far. So, any further thoughts on the Giants going forward? Because I really don't have any. I know they got 2 first-round picks, but we'll see how the draft falls.
Yeah, I mean, for the Giants, I'm not shocked at all by these moves. I was a little surprised about Joe Judge because I kept hearing that he was going to stay. But I don't know where those rumors came from. I just kept seeing them posted online
You know,
from all these reporters.
it wouldn't shock me that the front office was fine with him staying, and
Uh
then
huh.
just the peer pressure of New York and the fans, and just because last year was a solid year, they almost made it,
Yeah,
and then this year they just,
they
granted,
declined.
yeah, they declined. They also had some injuries too. I mean, Daniel Jones in and
True.
out, and the receivers they had, it seemed like different. And then Kenny Galladay never got involved, and Saquon's been hurt. Obviously hurt last year, but banged up this year. So there's some caveats, but I just it's just there's a common trait among these teams that are constantly in mid to bad is that they're just impatient.
Right.
I just feel like it's a little bit impatient move, but I understand it. I'm not going to say it's a horrible decision to let go of him, but I would have maybe given him one more year. He was kind of stuck with Daniel Jones. Not saying that Daniel Jones is the problem, but and then stuck with David Gettleman. But it's like you said though. I think regardless, they're going to bring in a new GM, and maybe they wanted to fire him anyway, so that they could say, hey, now it's more desirable. We got rid of the head coach. Now you can bring your guy in for sure. There's no potential quandaries there.
Yeah. Dave Gettleman, I mean, I've talked about their draft history over the last 5, 6 years, whenever he took over, and it's been pretty pitiful. Like, honestly, since 2014, they have had a top 12 pick every single year except once. And so they've been a really bad team for a while. That one time they didn't have a top 12 pick was
It's that you're the defense is really good,
2017.
and they lost to the Packers,
Yeah.
I think, in the wild card. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
That was the year that they made the playoffs. I think they were a double digit win team. Anyway, that was the year they drafted Evan Ingram in the first round. And he's been,
man,
yeah,
another person who like started off pretty good, like okay, he's got potential, and then
right.
it's just he has not progressed. He has regressed the
Right,
last 3 years.
but dating back to when this decline really happened, I would say the first year that they really like got to draft somebody, they did well. They got Odell Beckham Jr. at 12, really solid pick. But ultimately, we saw that somehow in the Big Apple, they weren't able to handle his personality, so
Oh,
he got traded. Which I would say most people probably say was a good trade for them. They got a couple first round picks, or maybe not as a couple first round, but they got at least one first rounder and some other picks involved in there. So
well, but they
they,
haven't really made those picks. Like, what did
yeah,
those picks turn
but
into?
exactly. So then the next year, ninth overall pick, they take Eric Flowers. That didn't pan out. And 10th overall pick the year after, Eli Apple. That didn't pan out. Then Evan Ingram, he's okay. The year after that, Saquon Barkley, and he's incredibly talented, but you know how I feel about running backs. You don't take them in the first round. And
Well,
even though my Cowboys did it, you definitely don't take one second overall.
and the Cowboys had a good offensive line,
Yes.
so it's like, oh man, we can set this guy up for success. That's my
And
worry about
also
Saquon right now is that,
at the time the Cowboys had Tony Romo. Like
yeah,
there was
there
reasons
was a
to believe
foundation.
that a running back can make it work. But even then, that was a very specific context. And even then, personally, I still would never take a running back in the first round just because look at Saquon, look at Zeke, look at all these top running backs from even 3 years ago. They're all hurt, struggling, all that kind of stuff these days. Anyway, the next year they had three first round picks. This is, I think, where they had the Odell trade. They had Daniel Jones, sixth overall. Has he worked out yet? I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's still technically potential, but just I'm not a fan of Daniel Jones personally. Dexter Lawrence at 17, I would say that was a solid one. I think he's a pretty solid starter. But then DeAndre Baker at 30, he wasn't very good even when he played.
And then
And
they
then there was
cut
the
him the
whole,
next year, right?
yeah, there was the crime stuff with the shooting at a cookout, wild stuff. And then, Andrew Thomas the next year and Kadarius Toney, both of those guys still have plenty of potential and room to grow. So we can't say anything about them quite yet. But so like they've had plenty of opportunities. I mean, since 2014, that's 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 picks since 2014 in the first round. And you could say that maybe two of them worked. Um, and that's not including Odell because I guess you traded him. So you want to say Odell, that's like three.
And
And
granted,
then,
to add to the confusion, they gave him an extension and then
right,
traded him, which made no sense. They gave an extension and
right.
said, we're not trading Odell. It wasn't even like, oh, they're trying to play coy. Like, David Gettleman came and said, I'm not trading Odell. And then, like, 2 months later, traded Odell.
Yeah. And
So,
then even in their second round, they over those years, they really haven't been better with like Weston Richburg, Landon Collins, who they got rid of, Sterling Shepard, who's still on the team, but he's
But
been injury prone. Dalvin Tomlinson, who ended up leaving in free agency, Will Hernandez, who's not very good.
yeah,
They
they'll
didn't have
get
a
better.
second round pick in 2019. Xavier McKinney, who's starting safety for them right now, and he's only 1 year, 2 years in the league, so you can't really judge.
What
Same with
year was
Aziz
McKinney?
Ojolari.
I'm sorry, I just want to look up because
Last year was Kadarius, or sorry, this year was Kadarius Toney and Aziz
no.
Ojolari. Last year was Andrew Thomas and Xavier McKinney.
So, ooh, I wonder. I want to look up the. I wonder what the order was because they probably could have. I wonder if they could have gotten in Antoine Winfield Jr. Because I would think I would say, I'm not sure if you would agree, he's better than Xavier McKinney. I'm just obviously
Yeah,
hindsight's different, and there's injury concerns is why he fell, but I just
yeah,
one
he
of
was
those.
number 36, and I believe Tampa picked him after.
Okay,
So I think he would have been available.
so he
Sorry,
was on the board.
yeah,
They
McKinney was 36. I
Yeah,
think.
and Winfield was probably
Yeah,
later because
Winfield was
Tampa
later.
the had like a teens first round pick, so they would have been like they would pick like 40 ish. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, so
All
yeah,
that to say, I understand why Gettleman's gone. I think they've whiffed on a vast majority of their high draft picks over the last couple of years. And for Joe Judge, I mean, it's unfortunate timing, but like you said, the media, it can impact decisions. I mean, look at Doug Peterson. The guy was like 3 years removed from a Super Bowl win. And because of the way that the season ended and there was the Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts debacles and all that stuff, even he couldn't survive. And that's just so incredibly rare that a Super Bowl winning coach would be ousted with not even 5 years, removed from that. So with Joe Judge, I think it's a similar situation. I know Giants fans weren't pleased with him anyway. I don't think that he necessarily showed anything ridiculously impressive that would, make me feel, you know, like I do maybe about the Brian Flores firing. But yeah, I wouldn't have been shocked if they gave him another year. So for the Giants, you get a fresh start, and we'll see where it takes you.
yeah, we'll see. Or it could be deja vu all over again, like some of these
Could
other
be.
teams. All right, so now we get into a couple of meaning games that actually had meaning. We're gonna start off with the Colts game that we kind of prefaced earlier. So yeah, Colts. All they had to do was they had to win, and they were in. It was against Jacksonville. Apparently, they haven't won in Jacksonville in a couple of years too. I think I saw some sort of
Since
stat.
2014, they have
Wow,
not beaten the Jags. That includes last year, where the only win the Jags had
was
was
week
in
one.
Jacksonville against the Colts.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, they don't do it again this time. They lose the Jaguars 26-11. It was I would say it was Trevor Lawrence's best game as a rookie, and they were just all over the Colts. Like I'll throw it to you in a second, but I mean, Colts had trouble. It's not like they weren't patient with the run. They couldn't. They had trouble running the ball, and then the game leaned on Carson Wentz, and he made a couple of mistakes, and it was just. It wasn't even a close. It wasn't even close. I mean, it was more like 26-3, and then the Colts scored a garbage time touchdown, 2-point conversion. So yeah, I mean, any thoughts are here?
This specific loss might be one of the worst regular season losses I have ever seen in my life. Not the game itself, like it was not a good game. Jacksonville definitely was the better team on this day, but like the context surrounding this, that it's win and you're into the playoffs, you control your own destiny. It's Jacksonville, who is the worst team in the league. They don't even have a true head coach, rookie quarterback, bad offensive line, bad defense, like only a few key playmakers that you can probably scheme for on either side of the ball. And you lose and you put up 11 points, and it was just a pitiful game from the Colts. I don't really have much else to say outside of that. For a team that was so hot in the second half of the year, this was a terrible way to go out. And I've seen a lot of people place the emphasis on Carson Wentz, and I don't think he had a great game by any means. He did have an interception, he did lose a fumble, but simply put, the Jaguars were just better all around. I mean, this defense allowed 26 points to the Jags. Like you said, Trevor Lawrence has his best game as a rookie the whole year. I think he had like 10 touchdowns on the entire season before this game, and he came out and threw two in this one. So, like that was just not the normal for him. They didn't even necessarily have a great game running the ball, like their starting running back. Agumbawale. He only had 30 rushing yards. Uh, but and then Marvin Jones, a guy who was trying to get a certain amount of catches in order to get incentives, he came out and torched your team. So it's really, really bad way to go out for the Colts. I've already heard that Frank Reich and their GM Chris Ballard, they are not on the hot seat, which is good because I think both of them are great. But their owner Jim Irsay was incredibly mad about what happened after that game, and he said that he expects major changes. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's something with Wentz because I don't know how his contract situation is
Yeah,
lining
well, and
up.
they don't have a first round pick because
They don't have a pick, so I don't know what that means for the Colts, but maybe that's coordinators. I truly don't know, and I don't want to speculate, but just yeah, really disappointing way for the Colts to go out in a situation in which they, out of any team, it seemed like they had the easiest week to clinch a playoff spot, and they simply got embarrassed.
Yeah, so yeah, tough loss for the Colts. They obviously go home early, and then for the Jags, I guess a solid win. Maybe it was everyone showing up in the clown mask or faces because they're upset about their GM still being, which also Jacksonville. I don't even want to get into Jacksonville because Jacksonville's a whole nother mess of just terribleness. But
The
yeah,
clown
another.
mask makes it even worse, though. Like your fans are doing that to you, and you lost to that team. Oof.
It's just once again you could have had like I feel like all the other coaches that were hired last year they already had to fire theirs so soon. Like that's the
Yeah.
epitome of just terribleness. So, all right, now we go to another game, which I was very disappointed by the result. Pittsburgh Steelers they stay alive. They beat the Baltimore Ravens 16-13 in overtime. So Big Ben's final season still rides on. His last dance. They get to go to Kansas City now. We can watch Big Ben another week, struggling to throw 4-yard checkdowns. Great. Um, any thoughts in regards to this game? Because I have something to say, but I'll let you go first.
Classic Steelers Ravens, low scoring rivalry, a lot of defense, not a lot of offense. Obviously, for the Ravens, you don't have Lamar Jackson. You're missing loads of players in your defense, your offensive line. So, what do you expect? So, this one sort of felt like reminiscent to, I think it was last year when the Steelers were at like the peak of their powers and they played the RG3 led Ravens and on like a Thursday or something. I can't remember when it was, and they could barely beat them. So, it's not pretty. It's how the Steelers win this year, but they got to win. And I can't wait to watch the Big Ben retirement party, next week in Kansas City.
You say that, and I'll keep going. Um,
If he beats, it's not he. If they beat the Chiefs, TJ Watt is going to have a monster game and
yeah.
just destroy that offense. That's the only way.
Which, by the way, I do shout to I would shout TJ Watt tied the record and did so in less games and with that groin injury. Unfortunately, he didn't break it. Really wanted him to, and it seemed like it was lining up to because. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was going to say, I saw somewhere that there was one play that was questionable if he got a sack. They didn't rule it one, but the NFL said they were going to review it. So I don't know if the results come out about that yet. Maybe that means he has broken the record. I don't expect it to, just because that's
It's
a weird
Tuesday.
way
What's
to
taking so
happen.
long, NFL? Like, you're a
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar company. You should.
So
We should have our answer by now. Poor TJ got to live in suspense for the next few days.
considering we haven't heard it, I'm going to assume either number one, they said that he didn't, or number two, they're just being slow and we don't know. But I did see that somewhere. So at the very least, he's tied it. Maybe he'll break it. I don't know. But yeah, shout out to him.
Yeah. And yeah, Pittsburgh survives. That defense been their backbone all season. Granted, they've done some. They have moments on offense. They create. They have playmakers and Claypool, Johnson, Najee Harris, and obviously Fireman's become more involved recently as well as the years gone on. So, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, like very interested to see what happens with Pittsburgh this offseason. And but yeah, I expect Kansas City to take care of business against them. But once again, we'll talk about that more later in the week. But speaking of Kansas City, they were hoping for the Titans to lose to the Texans, and this really kind of back and forth this game. It looked like early on Texans are up 21-0 after the first half, and you're kind of going, okay, like went as expected. And especially me trying to chase John our picks, I was like, this is perfect. Titans are. I think you picked Houston, right? We both. I have the
Uh,
spreadsheet here. Why am I asking? Nope, wrong spreadsheet. Okay, I don't have it. Anyways,
I don't think I did.
all right, that may have been one I know we disagreed on Jacksonville, Indy, so maybe this one we agreed on. Nonetheless, looking like it was good. And then Houston comes back and makes things interesting.
I
Nonetheless,
took Tennessee.
okay, we both took
Anyway,
Tennessee. Anyway, so it didn't matter. But yeah, Houston almost made it interesting, almost helped out the Chiefs there. Nonetheless, Tennessee gets an important win. I think Derrick Henry did. I think he played a few snaps. I remember. I'm trying to pull up the.
I don't think he played. I
He didn't
don't think he
play. Okay,
played.
he was okay. You're right. My apologies. But regardless, Ryan Tannehill, who I will ruin it, not a baller of the week, but was it heavily in consideration. He had 4 touchdowns, huge game for him, and we saw AJ Brown, Julio Jones get involved, something we've been waiting all season for. So, any thoughts in regard to this game, and I guess the Texans going forward?
For the Texans, I've started to hear rumors that David Culley might get fired, and I don't really know why. They weren't a very good team going into the year. I don't think any
Did
head
anyone expect the
coach.
Texans to get 4 wins? Like, so
No.
I think he should keep the job. Like,
Yeah, and I mean honestly, like here's the crazy part is Davis Mills has actually had some really good points in the year. Like this game, he threw 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 23 of 33, 0 interceptions. Like that's a great game for a rookie quarterback. Now, albeit it's against the Titans team that maybe let off the gas a little bit towards the end because they had a lead and they don't have the greatest of secondaries, with the corners throughout the year have been dealing with injuries. Um, but at the same time, like I don't know, I just feel like what did you expect from David Coley this year? If you're going to fire him now, like it seems like why'd you hire him in the first place? I don't feel like the guy's been necessarily given a fair shot if you're going to fire him after 1 year with the team you gave him and the Deshaun Watson stuff and everything that's gone on there, JJ Watt leaving, all that. So, good win for the Titans. Great fight out of the Texans to try and make a comeback late. They made it interesting. I'm sure the Chiefs were probably sitting at home watching this game intently, just rooting for Davis Mills all the way. Couldn't get it done for him, but shout out to the Titans. Shout out to Julio Jones, who got his first touchdown as a Tennessee Titan. He struggled in the red zone throughout his career. People thought that maybe it was Matt Ryan, maybe it's Julio. I don't know. So yeah, good win for the Titans because they secured the first seed. That is the most important thing for them. Get Derrick Henry another week of rest, and now you get home field advantage throughout the rest of the playoffs.
yeah, and just in regards to, I will say Titans low key like solid team, good defense, and they're missing their first round pick too, which is wild. And then yeah, I mean, I just think a little more respect needs to be put onto Tannehill. But yeah, in regards to Davis Mills, you did mention too. Like, I think I'm not saying he'll be a star, but I think he could be a solid guy. Whether they keep him or not, he's obviously shown some signs, and obviously with not a lot of talent there. So we'll see what happens there for Houston. Hopefully David Culley keeps his job because I feel like this year should be a win for Houston. The fact that they got four wins without Deshaun Watson, and that whole situation is still going on. I feel like if they fire David Culley once again, just like Jacksonville, just another organization that just is dysfunctional. And I don't throw that word around lightly, but I would definitely label those two. Jacksonville's definitely dysfunctional. Houston, borderline. You're getting there, Houston. You're really close. Honestly, you could argue, like if you were to argue that they were, I wouldn't argue against you. So, anyways, enough about them. Now we go to the Saints, who, unfortunately, unlike the Indianapolis Colts, didn't control their own destiny, but they handled their business and they beat the Falcons to try to get into the playoffs, 30-20. Fortunately, they didn't get in the playoffs. Taysom Hill got hurt this game as well. He had to leave early, so it was Trevor Siemian, but they still won against the Falcons. So, any thoughts here / comments?
I mean, the Saints, they did exactly what I thought they were going to do in this game. They ran the ball like crazy. Alvin Kamara had 30 carries. His backup, Tony Jones, had 7. Taysom had 5. I mean, they had 46 carries as a team. So that's exactly what I expected to happen in this one, just because it was a must-win game, and that's really the personnel you got. And I think despite them missing the playoffs, I think it was an impressive year for the Saints because of the context of what happened. Michael Thomas did not play a single game. You had a stretch of 3 or 4 weeks without Alvin Kamara. You started four different quarterbacks this year. Like, they just had a lot of injuries that went through this team, and I think it was a positive year for them. You swept the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, you had some really high points, and I think that you have stuff you can build on. So, with the context of the situation, great year for Sean Payton and the Saints. It sucks they couldn't make it to the playoffs. But I still think, like I said, it was a successful year for them. For the Falcons, I would say they exceeded my expectations too, even though they, 7-10, they weren't even really in the mix for most of the year. Uh, I figured that they'd be like bottom feeder team, like 3-4 wins on the year. They got seven.
Without
How does
Calvin
that bode?
Ridley for a good
Yeah,
portion too.
yeah, how does that bode well for their future? I'm not sure. I don't know what's going to happen with Matt Ryan. I don't know what's going to happen with Calvin Ridley. I don't know what's going to happen with anybody over there, but I think both teams can feel positive about the way their seasons went because of the way that, for the Saints, the way their year started off with the injuries and all that kind of stuff. And then for the Falcons, the way that their expectations were at before the season. I think both teams exceeded those. And so, yeah, both teams can hold their heads high.
Yep. So good for both of them. We'll see what these two teams do going forward. Both have interesting situations at quarterback with Saints Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston, or someone else, and then Atlanta. Do you roll with Matt Ryan again, or do you try to build for the future, move on from him, and get some assets? So we'll see what those two teams do. But now we go back to the AFC East, or to the AFC East. We haven't gone to the other game yet. Bills beat the Jets 27-10. It was a much closer game up until the fourth quarter. It was 13-10 for a good after the third. But the dam kind of burst, and the Buffalo won, and so covered. So, any thoughts here in regards to these teams?
Not really. The Bills are fighting for the division title here. I think they controlled their own destiny too. So it's win and you've clinched. So good win for the Bills. They came out, they handled their business like they needed to. I think Stephon Diggs hit some incentives in this one as well. And for the Jets, you're the Jets. You don't have a lot of talent, especially at the receiving options this week. I mean, just
Oh, and
when
Zach Wilson
Keelan,
got sacked 9 times.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the offensive line, we already know about that, which I wonder who's even healthy on that offensive line. Is their left tackle has why am I blanking on his
Becton
name?
has not played since week 1.
Yeah, okay. I never knew if he came back. I don't really follow the Jets. I
Yeah,
know he got hurt, and I just never knew if there was a timetable for him to come back. Obviously, there's that part. I don't know how Elijah Vera Tucker is done because, like I
he's
said,
been
I just
solid from what I've
don't really
seen. I'm
follow
not
him.
sure if he played this game. Once again, I didn't really watch this game.
Yeah.
Um, but they'll
So
have a high pick. Maybe they'll get one of the tackles in the draft.
yeah, and honestly, I love the way that they've invested in the offensive line over the years because I think with Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker, maybe add another tackle. You get a center because centers are typically, picked in like the third, fourth rounds. You can build a whole new offensive line through the draft, and then you have those guys with, Zach Wilson for the next 10 years. I think you feel pretty confident in that, and you get back to Jets football where you can play that sort of gritty, grindy style that the Steelers, all these kind of teams out in the AFC play. So I mean, not a whole lot surprising in this game. Like you said, quarterback sacked tons, and the receiving options you had like Jamison Crowder and Keelan Cole as your best options. It was just a rough game for the Jets personnel wise. You're unhealthy. You don't have certain star players, and you're just not a talented team anyway. So you're moving towards the future. Can't really say much else about this game outside of good win for the Bills to get home field advantage.
Yeah, for the Jets, two top 10 picks. Thank you, Seattle. So I'd be interested to see what they do. I'm sure they have cap space as well. I can't even think about who really is taking up much. So yeah, like John mentioned, they could easily, like especially if the Chiefs don't, the Chiefs have not reached an extension with Orlando Brown, solid tackle, and he could be available. They could easily grab him, have two of the two hog mollies and Orlando Brown and Mekhi Becton on either side, and then like John mentioned, grab a center or guard later in the draft. So that's a flexibility there. But we'll say, like what I saw from Zach Wilson towards the end of the year, started taking care of the ball more. I mean, it's like, I know it wasn't perfect. He went 7 for 20, 87 yards, and 1 touchdown. But like we just mentioned, he was sacked 8 times. Like it was just that was like the epitome of their season. So hopefully they add some more talent around him this offseason. And yeah, for the Bills, We'll see. I mean, their offense is still like sputtering, and once again, I just hope that they can find more ways to get the other guys involved, not name Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. They had a solid run game this week, so hopefully that's something they can continue doing so, which will help their offense. But until then, they're a weird team to pick. So, anyways, good win for the Bills. They took care of their business. Now we go to the West Coast Showdown in the NFC West, where the 49ers took the Rams to overtime and beat them 27-24. Quite a thrilling game to watch. What were your thoughts on this game?
Uh, so for this one, we're talking about the Patriots Dolphins, right?
Niners Rams. Patriots
Niners
Dolphins
Rams.
next.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So Niners Rams, this was a really exciting one for me because obviously this held some playoff seeding implications for the Cowboys. I was rooting for the Niners, although at the same time, which we'll get into this in our next episode, but now we got to play the Niners, so that's kind of scary. But I mean, the Niners, they great resolve. I believe this is the first time in Sean McVay's entire career that when leading at halftime, he lost a game. And of course, it was Kyle Shanahan that did it. I mean, we've talked about it. The Niners have just simply over the Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay eras. Shanahan has just had the upper hand, and they came out. They played better in this one. Stafford, I mean, he had an all right game, but the interception, at the end of the game, that was tough when you could potentially lead your team down the field to win it or tie. I can't remember what the score was right at that point. Uh,
That you talking about the pick where he tried to throw it to Odell and it was kind of
yeah,
underthrown. It was
yeah, in overtime.
yeah, it was after the Niners had scored the field goal, I believe.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah. So you could tie, and you'd give them the ball back, the game keep going, or you could win. Either way, I mean, the two interceptions, it allowed the Niners to get back in the game. Jimmy G also gave the other team some chances, but simply put, the Niners in the second half, their defense just came up big time. They were able to get a lot of pressure on Matthew Stafford, and I think you got to give a big shout out to that defensive line, Nick Bosa and the crew over there, because without them, I don't think they win this game.
yeah, that's a concern for the Rams going forward. Is their offensive line, especially when you talk about all these playoff teams. Really, all of them. I mean, all of these teams can generate pressure from their defensive line, uh, and it seemed to. I mean, like it would any quarterback team, is kind of start getting Stafford as the game went on. Um, but yeah, it was a great win for the San Francisco 49ers, despite Jimmy G throwing two picks, although one of them was that crazy one by Jalen Ramsey. Um, but yeah, credit them. I mean, once again, Kyle Shanahan finding different ways to put his best players in good positions. I mean, Deebo Samuel threw for a touchdown and ran for a touchdown. I was hoping he'd get a receiving one just to complete the hat trick. They would, I guess, it would be, but like in different ways. I wonder if anyone's ever done that. Anyways, the,
I'm
at least
sure
the
it's
NFL,
happened. I'm sure it's happened.
maybe. Anyways,
I don't know.
but yeah, great one for San Francisco, and for the Rams, it's another tough loss. And even that interception, like, although his line was shaky all game, like it's first down. Like you don't either. He's got to just either try to overthrow Odell so that if even if Odell doesn't get, no one gets it, or just don't make that throw. It's first down. You don't need to force the issue really there. But anyways, hopefully Matt Stafford can clean up just those little errors, yeah, and just forcing things, old school Josh Allen, people would say. So, yeah, critical win for the Niners, especially since the Saints had won. So they are in the playoffs and they will play John's Cowboys next week. So that'll be a fun matchup as well. But now we go to the Arizona Cardinals, who also had a win against the Seahawks for seeding reasons, but unfortunately they did not. As the Seahawks won 38-30, kind of in a shocking win. What were your thoughts in regards to this one?
Yeah, Seattle. I mean, they're just one of those teams. It's one of those divisional matchups that I feel like every division, every team has like one of the teams in their division that tends to step up and fight them and give them a good game. And Seattle with Arizona, like that last year, they were really great games. This year, they've been solid games. And Tyler Lockett, there's just something about that guy playing the Cardinals that he just always scores touchdowns and he always shreds them. So great win for Seattle. They put up a lot of points for Arizona. I was a little disappointed in the result for this one. It didn't really matter that much, outside of the fact that they get home field advantage over the Rams, but their record at home is pretty pitiful to where on the road they're actually way better, which is kind of surprising. So we've been, making the joke with our buddy Panda that they're fighting for, the potential to be on the road, and that's what they wanted because at home this year they are 3-5. On the road they're 8-1. So maybe this is what they wanted. Anyway, great win for Seattle. Who knows where the Russell Wilson situation stands after recent reports came out that he wants to stay and things are getting kind of crazy over there. So we'll see what happens. But at least for them, I think they still have some pieces. They just had some injuries throughout the year, so maybe they can make things work if they can start to hit on their draft picks. We'll see. But for the Cardinals, this one doesn't really matter that much because now you got to go play the Rams in LA, and you've already beaten them there once, earlier in the year. So you can do it. It's just, can you do it again? So um, shout out to Rashad Penny. Had a great game over the last, I think, 5 weeks. I don't know how long he's had his like monstrous stretch. He has led the league in rushing yards, and then if you subtract all the rushing yards outside of just yards after contact, he still leads the league in rushing yards over that stretch, even over Jonathan Taylor. So Rashad Penny has been an absolute monster, and Seattle fans are probably wondering where has this been the last couple of years. But maybe it's good to see it now because with Chris Carson, that guy can't stay healthy. So Rashad Penny, he's turning it on at the right time.
Well, that's been Rashad's issue is he hasn't been healthy since
Yeah.
he's been drafted. And they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. So I believe, if I remember correctly, I think he could be a free agent this offseason. So if I'm correct, that's what perfect timing to start balling out. And for Seattle, it's just really unfortunate because they're already strapped for cash, and they may have to lose him already, and it sucks. So we'll see how that situation plays out. And like you mentioned, the Russell Wilson one, because that would be very interesting. But for Arizona, I got a lot of concerns about Arizona going into playoffs. And then mainly their offense, their defense. I have a few concerns, but at least I think Vance Joseph's creative enough, and they have the talent there, except for maybe
JJ
corners.
Watt might be coming back.
Yeah.
So
So, but the offense all of a sudden is like, I know they scored 30 points this game, but uh, I mean,
Seattle.
it's Seattle. Their defense isn't great either, and I mean Zach Ertz he is your leading receiver, and I know Zach Ertz is still solid, but not the Zach Ertz in his prime, and so yeah, I got concerns about Arizona heading to the playoffs. I forget, but they played the Rams. You said right next week.
Yeah.
So
Rams in LA.
two teams that are just we at the first 8 weeks of the season they would look like the two best teams in the NFC, and then now going the past 9 weeks, it's like I'm not sure if they're the best teams in the NFC just because they haven't been consistent. So I think it's kind of quite fitting that they play each other in the playoffs. So now we go to the Buccaneers. They handled their business. They beat the Panthers 41-17. This was a close game going in the fourth quarter. It was a 7-point game. And then it just kind of fell apart for the Panthers. Kind of like how it did last year whenever it was like close going in the fourth quarter and then Tampa pulled away. So any thoughts here, if any?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze.
No, you're good.
Um,
Here, I'll filibuster. In regards to my thoughts, I mean, for Carolina, Sam Darnold actually had a solid game, but so we'll see if maybe they give him another shot. They did pick up his fifth-year option, so they're stuck with him with another year, at least contractually, unless they get rid of him. But obviously, I think they trade a second round for him, correct?
yeah.
So they don't have a second round. So they saw their first. Not a great quarterback class, at least
Don't think they have a
from what I've
third
heard,
either.
or a third. So really got to make that first round pick work. I'm glad that Matt Rule is staying where he is. I don't think that, once again, kind of like the Vic Fangio situation, didn't really have a QB. Only had Teddy Bridgewater last year, and I mean it's understandable that they took the shot on Sam Darnold because he had been in New York with no talent. But yeah, it'd be interesting if Carolina, do they go for a quarterback? I'm not sure about their cap numbers. Maybe they'll be able to address that or their offensive line too. Those are two big concerns: quarterback and offensive line. So we'll see if they address either or via free agency in the draft. And then also apparently Christian McCaffrey may be on the trade block, which I don't think they're really trying to try. I think they're trying to gauge like, oh, what can we get if he were available? Because obviously right now, I think we saw no offense to Chuba Hubbard, but outside of McCaffrey, their running game was non-existent. So, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. Just real quick on the McCaffrey thing. Maybe they didn't like what they saw when they were gauging interest because the GM came out today and said, no, we have no interest in trading him. So maybe they threw that out there. We're hoping they'd get some phone calls and nothing really came of it. Anyway, for the Panthers, I mean, this was out of all the games that was like, could shake up playoff stuff. This was the one that I felt like was the most clean cut. Buccaneers are going to win this one pretty easily. I was hoping Carolina and Matt Rule would get it done because that would vault the Cowboys into the second seed, but they weren't able to do it. And I'm not surprised. I mean, Tom Brady in an opportunity where he can make sure he has home field advantage, at least for most part of the playoffs. When you got guys like Rob Gronkowski who need some incentives, I mean, he was feeding those people. And you got to imagine if Antonio Brown was there that he would have got his incentive money too. Anyway, good win for the Buccaneers. They took care of their business. For the Panthers, like you said, to me, and Panthers fans have been pretty brutal online about the way that they've responded to Matt Rule. I've seen a lot of people start freaking out about that quarterback sneak that they let Sam Darnold do where he didn't convert it. They were saying that they should have put Cam. Guys, that wouldn't have made a difference. Say you score a touchdown on that drive, you still lose by double digits. Like you weren't, it wasn't close. Anyway, and plus, anyway, I love Cam, but I'm not going to get into that whole deal. The quarterback position for them, they don't have any long-term options. They don't really have any options to me that I believe can win them games. And so you got to fix that, and you got to fix the O-line. The problem, like you said, is the lack of draft capital. Sam Darnold trade, it didn't work out. And that's a miss right there. I have a buddy who he has some relation to the Carolina Panthers staff. And he said that they tried to trade for Matthew Stafford last year. That's public knowledge. Apparently there was a trade on the table that had both sides agreeing, and there was some ownership stuff that stepped in and didn't allow the deal to happen. And so you can't say that it's for a lack of trying. If Matt Rule is trying to go out and get a guy like Stafford, I think their season could have gone differently. There was a point in the year where I'd heard that, and I think there was like 3 games they had lost by single digit points that you have to believe with Matt Stafford that those games can go a little differently as opposed to Darnold and Cam Newton and PJ Walker and all those guys. So I think if they can get a quarterback that can, turn things around and then dip into free agency, get some offensive linemen here, maybe they get some key guys late in the draft. That's because, like I said, they don't have their second or third round picks. So it's going to be tough. But they have playmakers on the outside with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall Jr. They have some solid defensive players that I think, with another year together, they can be a really formidable force next year. If they can figure out the offensive line and the QB positions, I think they'll be a really good team. We'll see what happens. Panthers fans are incredibly impatient, but their owner has already committed to Matt Rule for another year, so we'll see.
Yeah, so I'm glad that Matt gets another chance, and obviously the Bucks keep rolling. Think so. They'll be in the playoffs, and like we mentioned, I forgot. Oh, they played the Eagles, those 2 teams already played earlier this year. So there's a rematch there. So now we go to the Sunday nighter, which was quite exciting. Actually, I was worried it wasn't going to be for a minute. Where the LA Chargers, whoever won would get in, but if they tied, both teams would get in, and it almost looked like it was. I had a couple of friends that are like calling it rigged. Mainly because I think this game was, man, talk about stock up for Herbert. I mean, the last fourth quarter was like drop pass, and then, he threw a laser, and then, it's 4th down, and then they somehow get the 4th down. And then, first, second, third down, incomplete with a drop pass or whatever. And then 4th down, they convert again. It was wild that he kept them alive. And it was just unfortunate that the defense just couldn't get a stop when they needed to in overtime. But what were your thoughts in regards to this game?
It was an absurd game, honestly. It was absolute chaos throughout the whole game. I mean, Justin Herbert, like you just said, he throws lasers. I jokingly text one of my friends that he might be the greatest 4th down quarterback I've ever seen. I don't have any stats to back that up. It was just, a joking statement, but he was incredible on fourth down. I mean, they converted 6 of their 7 fourth down attempts, and it seemed like, they couldn't get anything on first and second down. And all of a sudden you're in third, fourth and long, and they just made magic happen late in the game. And they continuously just did it over and over and over again off of the arm of Justin Herbert. So he made some incredible throws in this one, really kept his team in it. You'd love to see their defense put up a better effort because, you have a defensive minded head coach in Brandon Staley. They allowed 35 points, albeit 3 of them did come in overtime, but the defense really just wasn't able to get stuff done. And I think that's large in part because of what Josh Jacobs was able to do in this game. I mean, we know that they don't have a great run defense, but I believe Jacobs had like 150 yards on the ground. So, just a tough game overall for the Chargers defense and Justin Herbert, and it comes as a loss. And now all of a sudden the narrative for a lot of people is going to become, well, Herbert can't make the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But I think he had a really great game. And the Raiders, they were just simply the better team on the night. For the Chargers, you can only really blame yourself for losing to Houston a couple weeks ago, because that seems like that should have been a win. They didn't play very well in that one. They allowed Houston to score major points. Their offense didn't put up much stuff. And so they found themselves in a situation where they had to fight for their lives when they could have already had clinched. And for the Raiders, impressive win, man. Just really impressive win.
Yeah.
Everything that has gone on the whole year, Henry Ruggs, John Gruden, Nate Hobbs got a DUI last week. Just Arnett, got cut with all the stuff that's happened there. I mean, just a lot of stuff going on. They're in Vegas now, so a lot of temptations and stuff like that. The fact that they've made the playoffs, major shout out to Bisaccia, their interim head coach. Seems like a smart guy. Seems like a lot of people in that locker room love him. And so, I mean, talk about a great first impression, a great first interview for your potential long-term head coaching spot for the Raiders. So good job for them. Just fantastic win all around. They fought, they clawed their way through this year, and they're now in the playoffs. So good for them. I do want to comment specifically on 2 things. Number one, a lot of people are going crazy about Brandon Staley calling that timeout at the end of the game there. What are your thoughts on that?
He did. Okay. This is a whole mantra in the NFL. I listen to the Dan Lotard show, and they do the thing called useless sound montage. And like every week, as like a joke, they put in a bunch of coaches and people saying, "Oh, we're here to win. We're here to win," and that's ingrained in culture. They're here to win. So both sides are trying to win in theory, of course. So how was Brandon Staley supposed to know if the Raiders were gonna just run out the clock? And he probably saw his personnel like, man, we've been run on a lot. So let me make sure my guys like, hey, let's not get run. Granted, they still did, but like I don't blame him. And he said like I didn't like the person. I was trying to get the right personnel in.
Right.
And maybe give his guys a breather, just a few points. Just hey, let's not. It was a third down. Let's get the stop. And like I don't blame him for that. I really don't blame him for that. I think that was a little bit overblown. That's not thing in hindsight. Like, yeah, well, of course, now it seems like a little bit worse, but how is he supposed to know? So that's my thought.
So I have a bit of a problem with all these people that are sort of overreacting to this play, because I don't think it impacted the game in the slightest in the way that people are saying it did. Initially, my initial thought process was, oh my gosh, the Raiders were going to let the clock run out. But then when you think about it and you start to dive logically into the situation, which I know that most NFL fans don't, but if you do, if the Raiders tie, they get the 7th seed and they go to play Kansas City, who's already destroyed them twice. If they win, they become the 5th seed, which is much better than 7th. That means that potentially there is a possibility they can host a playoff game in the conference championship. Very unlikely, but there's a possibility where the 7th seed, you can't, no matter what. And so you become the 5th seed, and that's a possibility. But also you play Cincinnati, who, yes, did beat you earlier in the year. But if you remember back to that game, and it was a double-digit score difference, it was very close until late in the fourth quarter. Within the final 6 minutes, Cincinnati scored twice. And so that's what was the difference maker there. For the most part, it was a pretty close game. And obviously, both teams are very different than they were at the beginning of the year. Cincinnati has really hit their stride when it comes to the passing game, especially. The Raiders have gone through a lot of controversies, a lot of changes. But still, I think most people can agree if you're the Raiders, you'd probably rather play Cincinnati than play Kansas City a third time, who's already just destroyed you twice and knows you so well that I don't think it'd be much of a challenge for them to do it a third time. Maybe you get the advantage of you understand them too, and you can try and beat them a third time. But regardless, I'd rather play Cincy than I would Kansas City in the playoffs. For other people, maybe that's debatable. Next, if you think about this logically, there's 4 seconds left on the play clock when he called the timeout. It's not like he was trying to save time. Like you said, he said it was for personnel changes. And like, why would we not believe him? Like you said, Josh Jacobs was thrashing the run defense. They don't have a good one. I don't necessarily agree with subbing a linebacker out for a defensive tackle. They brought in a defensive tackle. They subbed out Kenneth Murray, the linebacker. I feel like maybe you sub out a safety, a corner, something like that, and you really commit to the run. I'm not a head coach, so I'm not gonna fully die on that hill. But regardless, he brought in his run defense, and that was the set run defense they had, and so I don't disagree with that call at all. And also, the main point to me is that Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach for the Raiders, came out and he said in his post-game interview, when we got the first down, we thought we were in good position, so we're going to take the field goal and go for the win. Which means if that's his thought process after the first down, you have to imagine, yes, they were going to run the ball regardless before the timeout and after the timeout because they're making sure at worst they tie and they do get in. But if they got the first down, they were kicking the field goal. And if Staley's worried about the run defense they had out there before the timeout, which I'm going to make a little reel about it, explain this with pictures to people. If you actually look at the personnel before the timeout, the Raiders, they have their entire offensive line, they have their tight end, and they're at a shotgun. To where the Chargers, they have 4 defensive linemen split out very wide. So the middle is potentially open with 3 offensive linemen versus 2 tackles. And you got 2 linebackers who are backed up like 6 yards. So if you can get an initial push, your tight end, you get some, key blocks on the inside, your guards split up and go to the next level. That's an easy first down for the Raiders, in my opinion, before the timeout. So I don't know. I think it's really overblown the way that people are responding to this. I think, honestly, if they don't call the timeout, it's an easier first down, and maybe that turns into like a 15 to 20 yard gain, and it's an easier field goal. So I like the timeout. You got the personnel changes. You have to play under the assumption that they are playing to win. Because if you try to play that they're going to go for the tie and you get lax, you could lose the game. And also another point, and this is just, a little nitpicky, but like, I can't show it here, but if you want to go back and watch the play where they actually got the first down, Joey Bosa was in prime position to make the tackle on Josh Jacobs at the line of scrimmage. So he could have prevented the first down. He missed the tackle. He didn't get it. Jacobs gets the first and some. They kick the field goal. They win. So as Brandon Staley said, it was not a matter of the timeout or play calling or anything like that. It was simply a matter of execution, and I agree with him. So very long-winded rant, but I'm just really shocked that is why people are freaking out about Brandon Staley, and not the fact that he went for it on 4th and 2 on his own 18 in the third quarter. If you want to freak out about Staley,
game, I think, right?
Yeah, if you want to freak out about Staley, freak out about that play call, not this timeout.
And also, they're division rivals. Like, you don't want want to beat your division rivals. I don't like. Yeah, that's just common. Like, if it wasn't division rival, like, okay, we'll tie with you. We want to go to the playoffs too. We don't want to mess it up. But yeah, I mean, all points are right, and it's just once again, it's just people. It's easier to say things in hindsight. Like that's what annoys. It's just, but in that moment, it's different. So those are the Week 18 reactions. Raiders are in. Chargers, unfortunately, are not. So we'll be going over those matchups and picks on Thursday, which will probably be out Friday and such. But and since it's only less games, we'll get a little more depth into the games, but also take less time overall. So that'd be nice. So yeah, Miami did beat New England 33-24. It was more like 31-24. There was like the late safety. I believe New England was like trying to I actually tuned out of the game at that point, so I didn't even know Miami put the extra 2 points up. But I think the bigger news is Brian Flores gets fired. I was shocked, and I hope he gets another job because his forte is defense. The defense has taken major strides since he's come in there, and I put more on the GM. I think this is, if anyone should have been fired, should have been Chris Greer, the GM. Their offensive line isn't great. They picked Tua over Justin Herbert. Granted, that maybe because the owner apparently wanted Tua. Here we go with the owner stepping in, trying to dictate things instead of the football guys making the football decisions. Missed on some draft picks. I mean, obviously Jalen Wallace worked out, but Austin Jackson hasn't really been great. At offensive line, they haven't. They have money. They didn't go after any guys last free agency, and Brian Will Fuller, he didn't do much. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I was truly shocked when I woke up Monday morning and I saw that Brian Flores was fired. And I hope he finds another job somewhere else and he can go to Miami and stick it to him because he did not deserve to get fired. Obviously, players and other people have already spoken out, and I'm sure you're in agreement with me.
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked by the Brian Flores stuff. For the game itself, I mean, tough loss for the Patriots. Obviously, didn't really matter because the Bills won anyway, so they clinched the division. So I don't think it affected their seeding at all, except for the fact that they dropped to 6 instead of 5. So now they rematch with the Bills, but maybe that's what they want because they beat them earlier in the year. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, for the Brian Flores stuff, I was absolutely shocked. I don't feel like this firing was warranted at all. I feel like there's plenty of other coaches who I could have definitely seen fired before Brian Flores. The fact that over the last 2 years, yes, you started both years pretty slow. This year specifically, 1-7 is pretty terrible. And if they continued that way, then maybe I see it because that's pretty hard regression. But then they finished the year 8-1, and albeit it wasn't against amazing teams, I don't think they beat a single playoff team on the entire year outside of the Patriots. But like you play who's in front of you, and they came out and they beat teams at the end of the year and they did it well. And I just feel like when you've beaten Bill Belichick 4 out of your 6 times that you've played him, you're 4-2 against him in your career, and you won 19 games over your last 2 seasons. I don't see how that warrants you being fired, especially like you said, when you have a pretty pitiful offensive line. Your quarterback's kind of he's injury prone.
He
And
was injured he was in and out the first part of the season too, so they had to go
yeah,
with him and Jacoby Brissett. That was like a thing too this
yeah.
year.
You don't really have a run game at all because your offensive line stinks, and your running back, you got Myles Gaskin, but
Had to
he's
pull
more of a
out Duke
pass
Johnson
catcher.
again the past few weeks.
Yeah, and even with your other running backs, like Gaskin's had COVID and injuries, Malcolm Brown had injuries. Like, what are you going to do there? Devontae Parker had injuries. Will
He's
Fuller,
always
your
had
big
injuries.
signing, he
Those two
played one
buggers.
game. So, I
It's
mean, there was just a lot offensively on that side of the ball that you're dealing with, and they still were able to figure it out. And like you said, his side of the ball is defense, and the defense has been the bright spot. They really changed the way they were playing in the second half of the year and started blitzing a ton and just let and stud safety Javon Holland. They let them play on islands, and it started to work for them. So I don't understand why Brian Flores was fired. To me, it has to be the relationship with the owner and the GM, because all the reports that I've seen have indicated that Brian Flores wanted Justin Herbert and the owner and the GM wanted Tua. And that led to Brian Flores and Tua having a little bit of an icy relationship. Now, from my brother-in-law, who his best man is Durham Smythe, who plays for the Dolphins. Apparently, Tua is a great guy. He's a very likable person, great leader. All the players, and I'm sure even Brian Flores, really like the guy. Brian Flores, that his entire time, has had Tua's back. He has repeatedly said he is our starting quarterback.
yeah.
Never even indicated that they were going to trade for somebody else. So I don't know what the relationship was like between Flores and Tua specifically, but I have to imagine that maybe the GM and the owner, there was some rocky stuff there. If Flores wanted Herbert and Tua, that was their choice. And, maybe at some point Flores slipped in a comment or something like, well, if we had Herbert, and can you blame him? Because look at what Herbert's been doing. Even, they didn't make the playoffs either, but look at the game that guy just had.
If he
I
had
have to
as good of a
imagine.
defense as Miami, who's been
Yeah.
top 10, borderline top 5 defense the past 2 years,
Yeah.
like I'm just saying, Miami's defense, I think, would not have let Josh Jacobs run all over them.
Yeah, and you still get a stud wide receiver like Jalen Waddle, who just broke the receptions record by a rookie. Like, they have options on offense too. It's just I don't know what happened that led to this firing. I'm not a fan of it. I think this is a move that bad organizations make, and I think if this is the way that their front office is going to conduct themselves, they're going to reap the seeds that they sow at some point.
Yeah, like
So
I would,
yeah.
I'm so excited to see who they hire because, like, no offense to some of these candidates, but I'm like, are you sure they're going to be better than Brian Flores? It's
The reports are Bill O'Brien. That's
oh,
one of the
I
early
hope
reports.
they bring in Bill O'Brien because is he Yeah, I hope they
And
pay
Bill
him really well.
O'Brien, like a lot of the hate he gets is as a bad general manager, which is incredibly warranted. So I think Bill O'Brien was still a fine coach, but everything I've heard from previous Texans employees, players, all that stuff, he was a very unlikable person and he was not fun to play with. He tried to pull like the Bill Belichick like hard demeanor, but he doesn't have Bill Belichick's personality first off, which you can see that like Bill has relationships with the players, but he doesn't have the success to back it up either. People are not going to buy in unless you are actually Bill Belichick. Um, so that's a whole other thing. But yeah, for Brian Flores, I'm hoping he's already getting interviews.
Just don't come to
With
NFC
some other
North, Brian.
teams.
I don't want to see you in Chicago or Minnesota. Like with all
Yeah,
due
don't
respect.
go to the Giants either. Go to like the Broncos or
Yeah,
something over
go to
there.
Denver. That's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine. You got some good corners there. You got Bradley
yeah.
Chubb. Like go over
We got
there.
some defensive stuff.
Go have fun with the Chiefs and Herbert. It's
Yeah.
4 times, 2 times each a year.
But anyway, I hope the guy can, get a head coaching job immediately. If he doesn't, I think it'll be very quick for him to rebound after this next year and be right back in, the mix. Because his resume to me, I don't really see any more qualified coaching candidate right now on the market than Brian Flores off the top of my head. Just because most guys are coordinators and haven't proven it yet. Other guys were previously coaches like Dan Quinn, but they had some really low moments. For Brian Flores, it felt like he was an ascending talent at the coaching position. So we'll see where he goes.
All right. So there it is. Did miss. Now we're done with the Week 18 games and our reactions. So there it is. A little bit disjointed, but hey, we're not perfect. But anyways, we'll be back next later in the week to do our picks for the wild card games, and we'll see if we can come up with some other stuff. But yeah, this went surprisingly longer than I thought. No worries though. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. Once again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments about anything we mentioned, feel free to hit us up, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening to whatever podcast service, Apple, iTunes. I don't know if iTunes is even a thing anymore. Spotify, etc. Also, though, we do have our Instagram that John mentioned, at Chub and Ball Pod. That's probably the best way to get us if you're just messaging. Also have our TikTok and Twitter, which is at Chub and Ball, and then obviously our Facebook is just Shut Up and Ball, and same thing with our YouTube. So yeah, hopefully everyone has a good week, and if your team's in the playoffs like us, we'll be talking about that Thursday. So come back.